I also think I would like to open a shelter for homeless women, and that there are buildings around where there definitely is, there's buildings that are in decent shape laying around, that could be rented or bought, especially if there's funding through the city of Richmond to help house, I don't know, anywhere from 30 to 50 people, several buildings. One is a miniature golf place that really had me thinking along the lines of the name Hole in One, or Mending the Hole in One. Kind of a play on words there. And what I see so far here in Richmond are shelters that are not really, they might say that they're trying to help heal, but unless you have a drug addiction or something like that, those I think are helping people. But if you're not an addict or disabled, someone like that, they're not really helping, and they don't have people who really care, or if they care at all, you can't really tell, because too many don't. Too many do not have a heart for the unhoused and have never experienced it themselves, and maybe just don't have all that much compassion, and to them it's just the paycheck, whether they're security or the other staff. They just, they fuss at you if you get a second bottle of water, and it's like that's where they're cutting corners, that's where they're cutting costs. It's not only is the building full of mold, lacking the structure like baseboards, but holes are just at the bottom, and at least in the bathroom, the whole bathroom. They're cutting a lot of corners that they shouldn't be cutting. No shower, and they get around things that should be there by not having it be a permanent shelter. It's only for overnight, and now it's closed. And I would want to open somewhere that is more permanent and give someone, approximately 6 months, not just 2 months, to really be able to get on their feet and to know that they have some stability. Because even when you can only go somewhere overnight and you're glad to get out of the cold weather, when you aren't for sure that you'll be able to find a place there because it's based on first come, first serve, you end up spending your day getting there hours early to stand in line to hope that you get a place. And there's just a lot of stability lacking that could be by just granting, if you had it like, if the shelter held 50 people, let's say half of those people are permanent and half are beds that are for, people, including people who would be new to the area, like myself a few weeks ago. And if you did have to have people leave for part of the day, it wouldn't have to be for the majority of the day. It wouldn't have to be where you only, or it wouldn't have to be where they even have to take all of their stuff with them, which is so burdensome physically. And not everyone has any income. Some people don't have any income, and some people somehow, I don't know how, but they don't even have SNAP, and they should, because they don't have any income and they don't have SNAP, and they kind of go around half starving. But carrying everything that you own, whether you have it down to one bag, or if you're one of the ones that has huge luggage and extra bags and it just seems like it's ever growing, it's exhausting. I tried to consolidate and get down to one bag, and I even bought a wheeled bag, and it wasn't the big kind. But even doing that and getting the weight off of my back and off of my shoulders, after about 4 days, it felt like I was lugging around a small luggage. It was a small piece of luggage of bricks. It hurt so much, and it was just using different muscles in my back from like pulling. I was pulling instead of carrying. And I finally went ahead and bought a storage unit, which I feel like is well worth the money, but having somewhere that people can store some of their belongings for the day and not have to take out more than what they need, because these ladies are carrying around sometimes sleeping bags, blankets, things that they don't need except for at night. And if they would be sleeping in the shelter, even if it was just an inclement weather shelter, there's no need for them to have to carry around everything that they own and have that burden, that physical burden. It's enough of a burden, emotionally, mentally. You are in survival mode, even if you've done a lot of healing like I have. Like, you know, life isn't normal when you don't have running water, somewhere to use the bathroom, somewhere to brush your teeth. Then there's the element of sometimes, not being able to even get on the bus if you have too many bags. I saw someone the other day that was homeless get turned down from being able to get on the bus. And they did have a lot of bags. And the bus driver was, I guess, pretty much a stickler, because I've never seen anybody else turned away, and I've seen people with as much stuff as they had. So I think that there needs to be something offering, help, not just so-called help. And healing includes providing for the things that would actually relieve burdens. So yeah, somewhere to sleep out of the cold is a relief, but it's not enough. And there are many people, even disabled people with huge very expensive wheelchairs, who are left now to be out in the elements, be out in the rain. People who, one lady I know who's in a wheelchair, like a really nice one, she also is on constant oxygen. She has an oxygen tank that I think she says she recharges. I'm not sure how that works, but she is very concerned about being out in the elements. She has, quite a few physical disabilities, and I think that there should be somewhere for her. They should definitely not just leave her. And there's also another lady who has quite a few physical disabilities, and she is very obese. And she, from what I hear, tried to commit suicide recently, but she's someone who struggles to even make it across the street in time where the crosswalk is, because she's so large. It's hard for her to and I'm not making fun, but to kind of waddle over. She's not able to do it in a timely fashion. And I don't know how much this person weighs, but let's say they weigh more like 500 pounds. I know that they go somewhere and have 5 people help them to bathe at the hospital, but on a day-to-day basis are left just sitting at a bench at a bus stop or at a bench near the library. And once she wanted to come to the shelter, and I said, "Are you going to come?" And she said, "Well, I can't cross the street and the bus doesn't come on this side." And I said, "Well, it comes on this side a few blocks down. I'll walk with you." And she's like, "No, that's okay." She didn't think she really was up to that walk. And it's really sad. And so, sometimes these people end up smelling like urine or worse, feces, because there really aren't public restrooms the way there should be. You're limited at the getting into a bathroom by either needing to buy a coffee or buy food somewhere, because the doors are coded and only for customers. Or at the library, you are stopped if your bag is more than 20 inches long or wide, or if you have more than 2 bags, and they count everything as a bag. I had a coat that went into a bag to become smaller, and that was counted as a bag. And really it seemed like the librarian was almost getting kicks off of me not being able to come into the library. And I had already reconfigured, and this is going back several weeks, but that's before I got my storage. But it was frustrating, because it's well, I need to use the bathroom and I need to charge my phone, and these are things I should be able to do. And when you go around and have to pay for, let's say I drink coffee, so let's say I have to go to McDonald's or Starbucks or whatever place to use the bathroom, and I have to pay for a drink, the $4 or $5 over and over and over through your week really adds up to a lot of money. A lot of money that you really shouldn't have to spend unless you really are wanting to get that drink, but a lot of times it's just because you need to use the bathroom. And there aren't public restrooms, even at the bus transit, where you can get on any bus sometimes, often the bus stops so much. The bus rides are often an hour long, some are longer. But if you're getting from one bus to the other, even at the transit, there are porta potties, but they're locked and they're only for personnel who work there, security and the bus drivers. And there's nothing for not only the homeless, but even the non-homeless. There's nothing for someone traveling using the bus who is spending, approximately sometimes even over 2 hours on a bus because you need to have a connector bus. And there's just nothing. And if you would go and try to find, in between your stops, if you have to stop, which I had to do that once, and found a McDonald's and had to buy something, then I had to wait a whole nother 45 minutes to wait for that same bus to come back around, and even as much as an hour sometimes. And that eats into your day. And there's just a lot of things that aren't what they should be. I've seen people be thrown out over literally nothing. I've seen people who work there at the shelter I was staying at, that's only open for cold weather. It's closed now. But I've seen people be cursed at, but then the rules say the ladies will be kicked out if they curse. So there's definitely a double standard. I have written 2 formal complaints about incidents that happened and never had anyone come to me about those, and never was anything done. I've heard from many people time and time again similar complaints, and some of the things were pretty bad, like someone ejaculating in their bed, and it was someone who is, considers himself female but is born male. And I don't want to get into gossip, and I can't know if that was true or if the person could have been making it up, and I'm not mentioning any names, but it was pretty serious if that is true. If something like that happened and was reported and nothing happened about it. I reported a sexually explicit comment that was very off the wall comment made to me by a 70-some-year-old woman who I later learned was not in her right mind. But it was one of my first days there, and because of the nature of her comment, I did report it. And supposedly if there's sexual advances or those kind of things, you're supposed to actually be kicked out over. But this lady would say inappropriate things to not just myself but to lots of people on a regular basis, and nothing would happen. And then other people would get kicked out because they were allergic to fish, and fish was being served, and they would ask for more of one of the sides and were told no, and then they didn't receive that real well because they were like, but I'm hungry, and they wanted more mashed potatoes or green beans. And I think their request was very valid and should not have been told no, because if you're not getting the fish because you're truly allergic, there were 2 people who were allergic, then it's right that you would be given more of something else. It's ridiculous that we could only have one little 12-ounce bottle of water with our meals, which is only 2 meals, dinner and breakfast. And most people, I would say, are going around in some at least minor state of dehydration, because between not being able to find bathrooms to use in the public, and then not being in the shelter all day, and then in the shelter when you are there in the evening and in the morning, only being allowed, a total of 2 bottles of waters, that's not enough. And occasionally they would have the 5-gallon water, and then that was great because you could get a cup and refill it or refill your water bottle. But usually that wasn't the case. And when people are even slightly dehydrated, you're not feeling optimum. And there's already so many reasons that when you're homeless, or unhoused, that you're not feeling optimum, because you're carrying so much, and maybe you're concerned about what you're going to do when the shelter closes, or now that the shelter's closed, you're worrying where you're going to be when it rains. Tomorrow it's supposed to rain. Where are you going to find, especially if you have oxygen mask and expensive wheelchair that your insurance company is probably not going to just want to replace because it gets damaged by you being out in the elements. And these are very practical things that need to be addressed. I see lots of buildings that are not exactly abandoned, but maybe they're not for sale yet. They're just sitting, like the miniature golf one. It's just sitting, and it says closed, and on the other side it says thanks for 54 great years. And it's a very nice building. It has a metal roof. It has stone, at least stone outer wall. It has wrought iron gates around it. It has security already built into the building. And I wonder how hard it would be to get a shelter up and running. I don't know if the building has showers or if it would meet all of the criteria, but I know where I was staying doesn't meet the criteria either, and the way they got around it was by not having it be open all the time, by not having it be a permanent shelter. If I had to send people away for part of the day to get around some of the coding, I wouldn't send them away for all of the day, and I would allow them to have some storage somewhere that they could keep the things that they didn't need, like their bedding, instead of leaving that burden on them, literally, to carry. And the city needs to do something about all of these people who are not receiving SNAP. If you're homeless in the state of Virginia, you are supposed to automatically qualify for SNAP. And there's no excuse for these people to not have SNAP and to be starving, except for going around to different churches on certain days, and they're really hungry because you can only really get a lunch and occasionally a dinner. You can't get breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And nor should you have to go around like that. You should be able to get SNAP. And people who have homes, people who are not struggling the way someone is who's unhoused, have SNAP. And if you're unhoused, you should be able to get SNAP. I've met so many people here in Richmond that don't have SNAP but should, and several who have no means of income in any way. They don't have any disability or any kind of, any money coming in at all. And they rely strictly on those churches and on those free meals they catch on the road. And oftentimes that kind of food, especially if you're someone who's diabetic or pre-diabetic, are so carb heavy. The main dish might be spaghetti with a little bit of meat, and then there's bread, and maybe they have chips, maybe they have soda, and it gets to be where it's so much of a sugar overload or a carb overload. You do good if you have any kind of vegetable served, but I would say by and large the vegetable tends to be mashed potatoes or something also starchy and white. And so there's really not consideration for people who might have restricted diets, whether it's a gluten allergy or just not wanting to become diabetic. We're not meant to eat that unbalanced. Anybody, you will become diabetic if you just keep eating that way. And it's really just too much sugar altogether, in the natural sugar, even with the addition of sweet drinks and desserts and things like that. But even if you omit the sweet drinks like I do and omit the desserts like I do, you still will find yourself having it's too much. And so then you're left still kind of hungry on a certain level, like your body's certainly not getting the fruit or vegetables or the minerals and vitamins that come from those colored things like carrots or asparagus or avocados or whatever it is. So then you're malnourished, and that's another thing I would want to implement would be at least in some way trying to, it is more expensive to eat healthy, but it's either that or it's paying later through medical bills or a shortened lifespan. And I think that's part, at least why it's set up the way that it is, because it's really a lucrative business, the medical industry. And there's much incentive for the American people to not truly be healthy in the least bit. But these women's shelters or homeless shelters that say they promote healing, they really rule by control. And I want to do something different. I want to do something different.